Okay, so several of you have asked about how to make it snow. And so I'm going to give you a little crash course in that. And basically it is really just having some still shots and then moving them in After Effects motion graphic style. So what we have here is a Photoshop file. And I have two layers in this Photoshop file. So this is a still file, there's no animation in this. I have a layer of big snowflakes that I've made, and I have a layer of small snowflakes. And this will give us the illusion of depth. And if you notice, none of the snowflakes go off the edge. And this is really important because we're going to end up duplicating this frame and stacking them on top of each other so that we can just make them kind of one big long thing. You could make like a really long, super long composition that's, several thousand pixels high, but I find it works just as well to just stack them and you can only have one thing. So this is pretty much all we need. I put a black background on here just so I can see them, but we're not actually going to use that in the composition. So you can save this as a Photoshop file and we'll take that over into After Effects. Okay, so here we are over in After Effects and we are going to start a new composition. 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second, however long you need it to be. And we need to import our footage. So I've got a background here. You could also have your entire animation as a frame sequence or video. If you've managed to finish that in Photoshop, then you can just composite it here. You can bring in various layers. So here we have our background in our composition. And we need to import our Photoshop file. So we're going to import this as a composition. And that is going to allow us to access all of those layers in Photoshop and manipulate them in the way that we want. So here we have a new composition, and you can see we've got our snowflakes in there. And each layer is sort of its own deal that we can turn off and on. And don't need that black background. We don't want that. So now if we go back to our little forest scene and we put the snowflakes over it, there they are. And we can see that, this composition is actually almost 4,000 pixels wide, so it's quite big. That's why these snowflakes are showing up as really big. So we can scale that down to fit our scene. And then what we're going to do is we're going to animate the snow actually inside this composition and make the snowstorm happen inside there instead of having like a million layers on top of here. We'll just keep it a little bit neater. Okay, so we're going to turn off the big snowflakes and focus on the small snowflakes first. And so what we want to do is essentially we want to create kind of like a long stack, but we need to have some variation because we don't want it to look exactly like it's cycling. So if I duplicate this layer several times, and that's Control-D or Command-D, then I can move it up here to the top, and then I'm going to parent it to this first one here. So now if I move this first one, you can see that the snowflakes are kind of moving down all together. So I'm going to actually do that several times. I'm going to zoom out so you can see this. Okay, so now we have a whole bunch of these and they're all parented to this one thing. And so really, for the most basic snowflake, snowstorm, we could just set 2 keyframes like we did with a pan and open up the position area, set one here at the beginning of the scene, set one here at the end, And you kind of want to think for 5 seconds, is it snowing lightly? Is it snowing, snow goes pretty slow. Oops. We want to make sure we grab that bottom one. So let's test out the speed of that and just see how fast that's going. Could probably go a little bit faster. It's a little slow, so we'll just move that down a little bit more. Okay, so there's like the most basic stuff, but that's not all that interesting because it's very clear it's just one still frame, right? So we want to disguise that a little bit by adding some more layers. So we'll start with, I'm going to actually duplicate this whole thing and reanimate a second version of it. So if I select them all and I duplicate them and then I grab this one and I pull it down here, it will separate them out. And this is where we start to get like crazy layers and stuff, so you just have to keep track of things. You can actually change the color. So you could like make this little group of snowflakes a different color. And so here, these ones are parentage number 12, which is good. So we're going to look at the position here. And so instead of starting at that exact same spot, we're going to actually offset this just a little bit here. And then we're going to go to the end, and we are going to offset that keyframe just a little bit too, and I'm gonna move it up so it's actually falling at a slightly different rate. And if you really want to make sure you don't get any weird kind of duplication things, you can actually rotate the individual frames here. So it's kind of like a mirrored image or a flipped image. So if I go there and set this to 180, you won't actually see this because you can't see that here. Let me put it here. So already you can kind of see it's looking a lot better. I'm going to rotate this 175 here. And this is why it was so important to not have the snowflakes cut off by the edge of the screen, because you can see they're sort of like, all over the place. And we actually probably want to move this whole thing over. I can select the position and then I can actually move both keyframes at the same time so that we have ones that do actually go off the screen here. So I'm going to do this, here I'll show you what this looks like first of all. So now you see, now we've got kind of like 2 layers going. There's a little bit of depth. I'm going to add one more little selection here. Duplicate that. And we'll change this color to seafoam. That sounds nice. Okay. So this one I'm going to move over a little bit just so that I can make sure I have snowflakes on the edge of the scene here. You notice it's kind of thickest in the middle. That's because we have 3 things overlapping. So we could actually kind of manipulate this a little bit as well. And then let's go to the end. And maybe this one. Okay, so. Oh, we can see that this one is moving way too far over, so I need to actually just move that keyframe. There, that's better. I think they're actually moving at a little bit too uniform of a rate, so I'm going to take that middle one and just slow it down just a little bit. So there, so now we have like we have 3 different layers. This one is moving at one rate, this one is moving at another rate, this one's moving at a third rate. They're kind of moving not exactly straight up and down. They've got a little bit of sideways motion to them, and so that just gives you the illusion of winds blowing in different areas, and let's do that, let's see what that looks like. And this is a nice illusion of depth. Now, if you really want this illusion to kind of this sense of depth, that's when we bring in these big snowflakes. And these ones, actually, we might want to take this layer and put it, you know, on top of any foreground animation that you have. So you could make a whole separate cycle with the big snowflakes. But for now, we will just put them on here and see what we can do. Okay, so I have to turn this guy on, otherwise I can't see him. And we will move him back down to the center. Okay, so let's change him to Peach. And then we're going to duplicate him and essentially do the same sort of idea. And I'm going to maybe change the scaling just a little bit and rotation to 80. And the reason that I'm doing this is that it doesn't look like it's exactly duplicated. We get some variation in the snowflakes. And then I'm going to parent this one to the first one. And I'm going to duplicate it again, move it up. Also add some variations in rotation. Let's put this one at maybe 15. That might be too much, maybe 10. 10 and scale it. Kind of offset it a little bit maybe. Okay, so let's see where we've got, what we've got here. So I'm setting this position here, and then we're going to say that, you know, as these snowflakes go down, the foreground ones might move a little bit faster. So we're probably going to need a whole bunch more. But let's see how that speed is working first of all. It would help if I zoomed in, huh? Maybe just go a little bit faster, let's see. And we can duplicate these 3, move them up on top. Looks like we might need one more. Okay, so now you can see we've got a nice little snowstorm going on, and let's take this back over to our background and put it on top and see what it looks like. So we can switch to this composition here, and I already have the snowflakes composition right on top, and so you can see the snowflakes are already there. Now if I play this, there we have a nice little snowy scene. It's got some depth to it. It has some variation. We're not really fixated on one particular snowflake. And that all comes with kind of making those little variations, changing the scale, the rotation, defining a diagonal path, just slightly diagonal for different layers. And that kind of replicates the randomness that we find in nature. So give it a try, and I can definitely help you out if you run into problems.